even in the creation of the Orifeme that the humans here came out of, we took on a commitment to assist the fallen races, particularly the guardian races that had fallen into the phantom matrix. Right now, that genetic propensity that we've had has been abused to a very large degree. When it comes to our recent history in the third seeding of the humans on this planet, that genetic propensity has been amplified as far as crossing it with more of the Metatronic races. So each of us now carry a genetic legacy that is partly phantom, which is a reversed coding. It's partly Weesadek, which is a beyond the point of return reversed Metatronic coding, and the part of us that can get us through, which is the original divine blueprint that holds the imprint for everything in this time matrix. Angelic humans have the imprint of everything from D12 to D1 in this time matrix. The indigos, 1 and 2s, have everything from D15 on down for the indigo 2s, and everything from the primal sound fields on down, or the higher God worlds on down, for the indigo 1s that have 48 strands. On a personal level and on a race level right now, what we're dealing with is a shadow side that is genetically real, and it's the part of ourselves that's either going. What happens with our shadow is either going to make it or break it, as far as which path of future evolution we end up on. There are some people that don't have 30% of their DNA templates, their original DNA templates left. They have been Metatronicked. They've had the fire sword initiations, which began in this particular line, in this particular seeding of the humans. It began in the Atlantean period after 25,500 BC, where certain groups, and these were begun with the Drac races, because the Dracs had actually gone over first. The Omicron Draconian races and the Leviathan races down here had gone over into joining, some of them had gone over into joining the Weesadeks first. So it began as a Draconian initiation. Then in 22,326 BC, it was actually 340 BC, right before that stellar activation cycle, when Thoth led his Leviathan races into Weesadek contracts. That's when more and more races were subjected to the fire sword initiations, and then those races were forcibly combined with angelic human and indigo races, so the virus spread. So we all have, to some degree, the Metatronic coding. The Metatronic coding means that we are susceptible to frequency fence. Frequency fence is beaming through the planetary grid something that doesn't belong there, that can alter the way the brain and the body works in relation to consciousness. A frequency fence is like an interference pattern. If you think about electronics, what do they call those things? The jamming frequencies? You know, if you're sending like a radio frequency, there's another type of frequency you can send through that to break it up, so the transmission doesn't get to the other end the way it's supposed to. Yeah, scrambler. Yeah. Okay. Just like when you try to get the cable picture but you haven't paid for those channels, you know, right? You know, you pay for it, you get the, you know, you can get the frequency through, but if not, there is a frequency fence that scrambles the coding. Well, the frequency fences that they use on a planetary level scramble the coding, the communication between the higher parts of your own identity and your 3D parts here. They scramble the operation between the brain and the emotions and the body and the spirit. Because we've all been subjected to some degree of Metatronic influence, we all have a susceptibility to that, even indigos. We all carry that with us. What it's going to culminate into is a path of the 3 paths of Genesis that are mentioned in the itinerary. There are 3 paths of evolution, and only 3. Because we're now in the heroic probability, which means the divine blueprint is being reset. That means all sorts of other things are going to adjust themselves accordingly. There are 3 paths that the human beings, and not just the human beings, but the plants and the animals and the minerals and the things you don't see that are 2-dimensional, the elementals and things like that, that are going to evolve into. We have the path of Aramatena, which is the original D12 divine blueprint path of this time matrix. That is the path of freedom. It is a path of the Emerald Covenant. There is the path of Arimathea, which is the path of Metatron. That is a permanent path, because once the races make that shift and It's like right now we have 2/3 of ourselves metatronically coded, but 1/3 is shut off. If you can recode back to its normal pattern, that half of that 2/3, so you only have 1/3 metatronic and you're back to 2/3 of your normal template, you'll be able to not have your shadow drag you into metatronic alignment. But there are races now, there are beings on this planet, people we know, people we care about, animals we know and animals we care about, plants we like and plants we care about, that have too much of the metatronic coding to undo in the short period of time we have left before the separation occurs. There's one path left for people who have at least 30%, or beings, or things, or planetary grids that have 30% of the original divine blueprint, is the path of the host, which means they won't be able to hold enough frequency in their bodies to make the full plug-in to their own divine blueprint. There are certain guardian races, Rishi and Ascended Master collectives, that are assisting. They're literally sending frequency alternatives. They will be hosted into other time matrices that they're more compatible with, time matrices that will preserve them from being taken into the Wisedet matrix. This is going to look very strange as the three paths of Genesis come upon us. And they're Genesis because they are literally new species are being born now before our eyes through this change. The original species of the angelic human and the indigo will be regenerated. It will be regenerated, but it's new compared to what it was, because now it also has portions of the metatronic coding, which means it has abilities to heal certain types of beings that are in a phantom type situation that aren't fully gone. So there have been things we've learned and things we've acquired as humans and as indigos that are different from our original creation. It's an expanded creation compared to what we originally started as. There's a new creation, and this is what the United Resistance, the United Intruder Resistance, and the Wisedeks, their whole focus is on. They are creating a new master race right now. They are creating it here on Earth. The people that are hijacked into full metatronic coding will be a new race. They will be a race that has what used to be indigo children turned into magentas. The magenta races, are going to be the highest coded fallen races that have ever lived, because they have the indigo coding of, they have 12 strands. And they can go into what they're trying to do with the indigo races, turning them into magentas, is take them from a 11.5 strand reverse potential into a 12.5 strand reverse potential. Divine blueprints at D12. They are creating their own divine blueprint for their matrix, a reversed one, an antichristos one. There are people that many of us will know, people that hang out with Archangel Michael and a few other very popular speakers. Some of the people who follow traditional religions that since Atlantis have been distorted into something they weren't intended to be. These are the new bodies that the Metatron people are going to use to create their master race. However, a lot of the people in those bodies were the people that incarnated out of those matrices in the Phantom Matrix to begin with. So it's not as horrendous a level of victimization as one might think on the surface. On this planet, there's been a continual and progressive infiltration of the fallen angelic races from Phantom Matrix. And after Wisedet got involved, also from Wisedet Matrix. In the Atlantean period, the Leviathan races, which were originally a hybrid. I'll talk about them briefly in a minute, because some of you may not know what I'm referring to when I talk about Leviathan, and I will go over this page quickly, creation of the Leviathan. But in the Atlantean period, anyway, there was a huge influx of both fallen angelic souls from the Phantom Matrix and from the Wisedet Matrix, where a huge number of the people on the planet right now weren't originally human to begin with. Right now, they're wearing the mask of a human body, just like we are. What we call a human body right now is a mutation. This isn't what a human body looks like. A human body is much taller. It's much lighter in density. It's about, twice, 3 times less dense than what we are right now. It has abilities of all sorts of things, like levitation and appearing and disappearing, Merkaba, and all sorts of things. What we've all been living is a shared mutation. That mutation was done, we have what's called the base 4 mutation, where we are base DNA, and this applies to plants and everything else on this planet. In the Atlantean period, between 25,500 BC and 9,558 BC, this mutation into an all-oneness, where we all wore the same faces so we couldn't tell each other apart anymore, that's when it was orchestrated. It was orchestrated for the purpose of meeting at this time, where you wouldn't be able to tell a human from a non-human. And we would all think, and we would all have our memories wiped to the point where we didn't know where we came from. We had different ideas that were fed to us from somewhere that ended up in books that, became things that people killed each other over, that kind of thing. So when we begin to see some of the changes that are going down, and we begin to realize that there are 3 distinct paths that people are falling into. What is 3? All right. The path of, that's the 3rd one. Aramatana, Arimathea, and path of the host, which is get you out of here in whatever way possible, because you can't make it into the path of Arimathea. We've got to get you somewhere so you don't go into the other path, basically. That's what that is. And that will be, there will be a lot of diversity in that. It will depend. All of us have different stellar coding. We have the same imprint as far as, human, or some of us that aren't human. Some of us came from other places, and we really are, we're sharing the human mutation, or the Homo sapien mutation, let's say, but we're not even, human. Some of us are other types of guardian races that we're working with the guardians of this time matrix. There's Syrians here, there's Lyrans here, there's all sorts of beings here that might not have even come fully through the Orifeme imprint, but they were able to pick it up in Atlantis, because it was a free-for-all in Atlantis with the genetic stuff they were doing, so that can be used to advantage as well. It'll be interesting as we progress in our personal development, because we'll find out who and what we are. We'll find out, well, gee, I guess I didn't do an Orifeme thing. Gosh, I'm like blue. I'm a Syrian blue. Yeah, that's an Azurite. Some people are Azurites. If you see yourself, if you start to get images of a blue Syrian as your Syrian self, where you're very tall and thin, and you have, many of you have no hair, but have very fine feathers. But very human-like faces, and very elegant beings. Some will even have wings. Some of them have, they're crossed with more of the Seraphi races, and they have feathered wings and things. Others are just blue hominids. Kind of like that Farscape show. The Farscape show, they have the blue lady. Yeah, well, we love watching that for her, because she's the way she looks is very, very close to certain races that came out of the Azurites. One of them are the Maharaji. The Maharaji are blue humans that are right now the guardian races of Sirius B, and they're also the ones that interacted with Hindu culture here physically at various times. They will be one of the races that we will eventually meet. The Iani will be first, because they look more like us and it'll be less traumatic, and then and they will assist us in getting to know the ones they work with, which are the Maharaji, which are the blue humans. But right now, we're in an interesting place, and that place, the main events that led us to this place took place in the last Atlantean period drama. In that drama, the script was written and programmed into the radio body. The script didn't finish running. It just started running in 22,326 BC when the guardian races shut the gates, which means they pulled the plug on the computer so the program couldn't run. Well, the plug is back in now. Fortunately, it's on a D12 current. It's like upgrading it from in the States we have 110 and 220 electrical current. I don't even know what it is in European countries. But we have an upgrade as far as the current running. But the program is still in the grids. It's still in the radio body. And it's a program, because we're all connected to the planetary radio body, our own radio bodies. exist as part of the planetary radio body. It means there's going to be a script that begins running through our own radio bodies, which runs through our DNA, which will be a script on a personal level of impulses, feelings, sometimes thoughts. We never stop to think, oh, I'm thinking, where did that thought come from? We assume it's ours. It's going to be a good time to become aware of the fact that not every thought that moves through your head belongs to you. Not every feeling that runs through your emotional body belongs to you. All right. Did you ever stand next to somebody who was having like a real bad day and you could just feel the negative energy coming off them, right? And did you ever find that you went home and a couple hours later you're just feeling really yucky? And you can't think of a reason why. You took on, through field resonance, some of the stuff that was standing next to you. You're processing through your own system. And the healers have a big problem with this sometimes if they don't know how to clear that out, because you will start to take on the scalar waveforms from other beings or things around you. Now, this can be done purposely as well, and this is how the script technology works. There's an interface with the human biosystem, with the Homo sapien biosystem, that allows the radio body programs that are being sent through Nibiru and through Wormwood from Wisadak to move through our systems, where it's almost like having an angel and devil on your shoulder, where you have one saying, oh, I really like the Azurite teachings, like I can feel the freedom there. The other saying, oh, no, that's evil. It's telling you not to like Archangel Michael. It's telling you not to like Jehovah. You know, I mean, it can create, if you let it, this polarity in yourself that's very, very hard to rectify until you start asking yourself the question, where did that thought come from? Do I own it? Is it mine? Or am I having help thinking that thought? If we can realize we get a whole lot more help than we ever thought. And it's scary when you think about it. This is like, it's like soul rape, what's being done here, not to mention mind rape, because you're literally having something put things in your mind. It's like one of those horrid sci-fi movies that, you know, they have a technology that will let them beam into your brain things that make you do what they want you to. They do have this technology, and it's being used here. It has been since Atlantis. But now is the final big hurrah in the game, when they turn on all the switches and all the programs. Now, if you're working with D12 frequency, and particularly if you're working with the Vecca codes, you'll progressively build an immunity to that, where you will progressively, you might start realizing that there's a weird space you can realize when you start to feel like, wow, it's like a CD is playing in my head. That's not mine. You'll start to find this whole cluster of ideas or thoughts, sometimes it's emotions, that, you know, where in the world does that fit? And they're usually yucky, or they're meant to direct you in a certain way, and they really seem like they belong to you until you really stop your consciousness, get calm, and say, what is this? Where is it coming from? Do I own it? And really realize you might not. All right? I mean, once you realize you don't own it, then you have to own it, which means you have to say, okay, I'm not going to blame anybody for this. What am I going to do with it? Because the idea is to stop it from influencing you. The antidote to the radio body programming, which I call the CD in your head, is that's really what it works like. It's a CD that's operated off something called the Metatronic seed atom. And these are clusters of literally those, you know how we talked about the eyes, the lenses, the refraction polarization lenses? Well, these were built into part of our atomic structure here, through that the bottom part of the bottom can't spin. This is part of what our Merkabas are doing right now. It's part of what the planetary Merkabas are doing right now, and it's part of what we're trying to overcome. Now, the history of the Atlantean mess, as I tend to refer to it, it's fascinating. There's a huge amount of detail. On this page, where it says Creation of the Leviathan Force and related history, this gives you a basic idea of a little bit of what came before, just a real rough rundown. We have 250 million years ago, a angelic human seeding one took place on parallel Earth, and they were called the Palladarian cloisters. 25 million years ago, the 5 Palladian cloister races were seeded on Earth over here. So we've been here for 25 million years. 5,500,000 years ago, human seeding 1 on Earth was destroyed in the electric wars. 3,700,000 years ago, human seeding 2 was started. 848,800 years ago, human seeding 2 was destroyed via the 1,000 Years' War. And all of these wars guess who they were with? It's like the same beings. It was the Anu Elohim and the fallen Draconian races versus the Emerald Covenant races. And it was all about Templar quest, which is territorial quest for the stargates. But it wasn't just stargates on one planet. It was stargates in this whole 15-dimensional time matrix that they were after. Now, 798,000 BC, we had the 5 Pleiadian Urtite cloister races were seeded here. This was seeding 3, the beginning of seeding 3. You can read, because I'm not going to go into talking just about our seedings. What I want to do is get to the Leviathan races. Just know from 798,000 BC, that was the beginning of our 3rd seeding, and our races progressively, were put here, the angelic human and the indigo races. Then, there were a couple of other things that happened where between 669,000 BC and 250,000 BC, there were the Rama and the Templar Wars, and these were a mess. You had Anunnaki and Draconian invasions from all over, spaceship invasions. Things coming in with like sonic beams, photosonic beams that could make matter dematerialize when it got hit with it. Big wars, that kind of thing. We had a race of pre-Leviathan fallen angelic hybrid things called the Nephidim. They were Draconian, and another called the Urantia. These were Jehovian Anunnaki hybrids. These were the beginning of the Illuminati races. The Illuminati races were upgraded from this point and merged with something else. Now, that I'll talk about in a minute. In this period of the Rama and Temple Wars, the races, the Nephidim and the Urantia races, were not able to fully procreate with angelic human races. They were originally created through forced laboratory experimentation in some of the earlier seedings. And in some of the earlier seedings, in seeding 2, there was an experiment done, again a bioregenesis experiment to try to help the fallen ones, that allowed natural procreation between the angelic human races and a certain small collective of fallen ones supposed to be not, wanting to get out of being fallen. And that turned into absolute disaster. That's where we ended up with a seed race that went on, and they took it off planet. The fallen angelics took it off planet, and it became kind of like a core genetic template to upgrade their progressive building of a master invader race. Now, we learned our lesson in seeding 2, so we're going to do that again right away. And in seeding 3, the angelic human races and the indigo races were created in a way that they could not naturally hybridize, naturally procreate with any of the fallen angelic forces, which gave them protection from the fallen angelic forces. In 250,000 BC, there was a period of time where you had what are called the Pleiadian, Nibiru, and Anunnaki races. They're from Nibiru and from the Pleiades star system. These were the guys that in Sumerian history came down as Enki and Enlil and Marduk. Those gods? Gods. Yeah, they were gods. They were race lines that, when we get into the genealogies, that we won't get too heavily into today, but these were race lines of fallen angelic Anunnaki races. Some of them crossed with one thing, some of them crossed with another. The Enki, Enlil, and Marduk races, Anunnaki races, were considered, what do they call them? You had the Jehovian, there's a name, the Anu Seraphim. These were called the Anu Seraphim Anunnaki races. They weren't the original strain. The original strain were Anu Elohim, out of the Giovanni crew, and they were called the Jehovian Anunnaki races. The Jehovian Anunnaki races looked at themselves as the true, pure strain Anunnaki, and they didn't like the other ones. The other ones had crossed with various ones of the fallen Seraphi, be it draconian ones or some of the things that the draconians had created. So the Pleiadian Nibiruan Anunnaki races are Anunnaki races that have partial Seraphi or draconian type coding. You have the Enki, Enlil, Marduk groups. What were the full names of those? They're in Voyages, Volume 2. The Enki Zephelium. Okay, Enki Zephelium races, the Enlil Odedicron. Okay, so if you look at the Enki Zephelium, now Zephelium are one of the fallen races that are connected to the Zeta races that we talk about now. And they were a reptilian snake type cross. Okay, so they took Anunnaki, which was a core Anunnaki, was an aquatic ape. All right, that was the original form an aquatic ape hominid was the original Anunnaki form. So you take that and you cross it with, for an Enki family line, they would cross it with the Zephelium. So it's Enki Zephelium. That's the Toth line. All right. Now Toth is a Nibiruan Anunnaki. He was out of the Enki family. Okay. Now Enlil crossed with Odedicron, so they call him the Enlil Odedicron. Now that would be a more reptilian, fully reptilian, as opposed to snake, more of a reptile, think salamanders and things. Okay. And you have the Marduk group, which crossed with Omicron, which were the dragon moth people and the Dinoids. So these are the Anu-Seraphim Anunnaki races. And they've forever been trying to get the territory here. These are the ones that set up the Nibiruan Datic crystal grid in 25,500 BC. But way back in 250,000 BC, they were coming in here speculating for various things. One of the things they were speculating for was gold, because they had depleted Nibiru's resources of organic gold. Now they used gold in a very specialized way. They, through laboratory ionization, they call it, they create what's called, in contemporary terms, and it used to be called this in Egypt too, white powder gold, which is a substance that has the ability to create, let's say, electrical sparks within the atomic structure that allow more energy to be pulled in from the field around you, so it assists in sustaining immortal life. Not eternal life, but immortal life. There's a difference. You don't want to be immortal. Eternal, yes. Immortal, there are better things to do. But because they were running out of natural gold in their planetary system, and the Palladian system was devoid of it, it didn't have any to mine, Earth was very rich in organic, elemental gold. They literally, on Nibiru, once they created Nibiru in a way where it was in its artificial orbit, and it's an orbit that runs partially through the Phantom Matrix and then back up through our gates and into our system. It used to be in our system completely, but when it fell, they created an orbit that runs between the two systems, and every 3,657.8 years it cycles back through. So to sustain their atmosphere, they had literally changed their atmosphere, and you found a way to imbue this elemental gold ionized particulate structure into this white powder gold substance into their atmosphere, so they breathed it. And after many generations of that, it sustains the Metatronic body, is what it did. It helped to sustain the Metatronic body. After many generations of this, they couldn't survive without it. And there was all sorts of mutations happening on their planet with their peoples because they were running out of the amounts of gold needed to create this in the atmosphere. So they were on speculation journeys, trying to find places where they could rob more gold from. And this is where we got our original value of gold, actually, why it's so important. That was an Anunnaki trait. It's very important to the Anunnaki races because it helps them to sustain their immortal status in their bodies. And now that their bodies are mutated fully into the Metatronics, if they don't have some degree of that frequency that's created through white powder gold in their systems, they begin to rapidly deteriorate. Their physical forms rapidly begin to deteriorate, and their consciousness begins to fragment because they don't have a soul structure anymore that they're directly connected to. So in 250,000 BC, you had the Enki, Enlil, and Marduk, Palladian, Nibiru, and Anunnaki coming in and attempting to mine gold. And they started warring with each other because nobody liked to work the mines. And it was like, well, why should we work the mines? You work the mines. And they started to war with each other. So they decided to end that war amongst themselves. They were going to create a slave race, a slave race that would do the mining for them. The angelic humans and the indigos were. And we were in, certain parts, usually associated with the Stargate and the Q-site locations. They were always our seeding grounds. And there are lots of raids by these guys trying to, grab humans and do things with them. But they decided to create, they didn't want something as intelligent as an angelic human, because you're not going to control it, basically. They wanted something a cross between an animal and something that has some degree of intelligence where you could put it on autopilot and it would do what you told it to. So they created a race called the Lulcus. They created the Lulcus by taking their own imprint, their aquatic ape hominid imprint, and combining it with the gene code, a small portion of the genetics of angelic humans that had been captured in their raids. And they did it in a laboratory. They created it in a laboratory, like our scientists are starting to play around now. And they combined it with the angelic human, their aquatic ape, and I believe two other. One was an ape-like strain of animal from Nibiru, and the other was a monkey strain. It was a strain of monkey primate from from this planet. And what they came up with, or what we call, our scientists call, the Neanderthal. That was the beginning. That's where the Neanderthals fit in. These had nothing to do with human evolution. They weren't a part of it at all, but boy, have they tried to put Darwinian theory in there, so we start to think of ourselves as them. So they created the Locust Neanderthal. They were called the Locust. They were a primate hominid slave race, and they were able to create them, and they had a certain sophistication of intelligence, even though other ways they were very slow-witted compared to what a human is now, even now as Homo sapiens. But they had genetics that had a little bit of the angelic human imprint because of the part that they had literally robbed from the gene code. It's like grabbing a body, killing the person, but taking part of the DNA and using a select part of that DNA to cross it with other DNA. This is how they did it. It's laboratory messing. All right, so that created the slave races of the Neanderthal. In 246,000 BC, there was, and this was like the beginning of a new wave of evolution after the Rama Wars and the Temple Wars, where they created a mess. I mean, it was getting close to becoming another Electric Wars situation where everything got destroyed. And finally there were some agreements made. And in 246,000 BC, the Maharaji, which are the blue humans from Sirius B, on behalf of the Iani and the founders, brought in the Emerald Covenant restatement, which was brought in the information about the Emerald Covenant again, brought in the CDD plates, and said, any of you, be you hybrid or not, if you want to join the Emerald Covenant, you can. So this is when we were given the last set of CDD plates, the ones that we're drawing information from now. They were given in 246,000 BC. Now, interestingly, all of the angelic humans agreed to, yes, of course we want to do Emerald Covenant. We've always been Emerald Covenant. But the Toth Enki Anunnaki decided to go over into the Emerald Covenant at that period. So that was 246,000 BC, when Toth, as a being, Toth was an Anunnaki being, entered the Emerald Covenant for bioregenesis to get their DNA template back. Now, Toth went through, as a person, went through his own levels of bioregenesis, and he did very, very well. He got up to 11 strands, but he didn't get the 12th one before he bailed out and went the other way. But the Toth Enki Anunnaki races, they entered for bioregenesis, and there was a series of steps in this bioregenesis that was taken. It wasn't all, you didn't get all of the strands healed immediately. There was a progressive integration of one strand after another that would take place over numerous generations to slowly build up the pattern of the D12, the angelic human hybrid strand would be put into the Anunnaki strands. What it would do is if you look at the strands, is one angelic human strand had all the natural mathematics of the divine blueprint that goes with this time matrix. The Anunnaki strand had it all in reverse and didn't have 12 let's say, units. Okay, so we have 12 units in one angelic human strand. They only had 11 units. The draconian ones only had 10 units in each strand. So they had to progressively, for each strand, build up a 12 subharmonic pattern where they'd get that extra back and reverse it back to its natural mathematics before they would be compatible with the frequencies in the natural time matrix, before they could run the divine blueprint frequencies again. So this was what this experiment was about. It wasn't an experiment to see what had happened. It was an experiment that was done, a healing experiment that had the objective of healing this particular group of Anunnaki who decided to go into the Emerald Covenant. In 208,216 BC, this was a stellar activation cycle, and consistently with the rest of our history, during every stellar activation cycle, there was an invasion of some sort, and there was a Drac invasion. This time, it created what was called the Fall of Brennaway. This was when literally, in doing the round tables, all right, the rainbow round tables that the guardian races were always appointed to do to run the Templar here in order to, assist the planet in grounding the Stargate frequencies, they were infiltrated and invaded, and the rounds began being run in reverse because people were careless, and there was a lot of intermarrying between Nephidim, draconian hybrids that supposedly were being good guys now working the Emerald Covenant, and angelic human races. And angelic humans didn't realize that they were getting code reversals in their DNA template. So when they ran the rounds, they ran them in reverse. And it created, there's a major pole shift that took place in that period, because again, the gates had to be shut. They had to be shut, or our whole template, Earth's template, would have gone into phantom matrix completely. So in 208,216 BC is when we lost our ability to run D12 frequency, because what's called the stellar bridge, which is that frequency spiral, the Merkaba spiral, the universal level, that spirals the frequency down from D12 through all the universal gates to us, is supposed to anchor on what's called a 12-code pulse. 12-code pulse means every dimensional frequency band has 12 subharmonics. It didn't. It anchored on a 10-code pulse, and they blocked the other part out with the reversal of the round tables. So from that point on, we were like sitting ducks here because we didn't have D12 frequency available. We only had D10 frequency available. That means we couldn't reset anything with the divine blueprint without the D12 frequency to come in and reset it. So after this, there was, life went on. There was a pole shift, and there was a bringing the races during these times were taken into the inner earth, like the angelic human races, and any of the hybrid races that could sustain the strand activation will be taken into inner earth and allowed to hang out there until it stabilized on the surface. Then they'd be brought back out. And the angelic humans were always reseated on the 24 sites, the 12 Q sites and the 12 Stargate sites. That was their home, and their DNA is literally keyed to those grids. So we all have literally a place on the planet that we belong to, and it technically belongs to us. We belong to each other. All right. Now, in 155,000 BC, this is when the Anunnaki bioregenesis program begins in full. Now, way back in 246,000 BC is when the Tothenki group entered the Emerald Covenant, but it wasn't until 155,000 BC, because of all the chaos that was going on, that it actually began, where the hybridization program began. And the Lucas Neanderthal races, because they had a little bit of the human imprint, were used as the base species for this hybridization. So the Lucas Neanderthal were combined with a pattern, a piece of the DNA from another race called the Hibernian humans. The Hibernian humans had to do with seeding too, and certain races that were created through hybridizing between human and Anunnaki races. They were a type of Nephilim, actually, Nephilim human, but they were of the Ruby order that were trying to get their full imprint back originally. So upgrade number one, they went from Locust Neanderthal to what are called the Luhari, which was Cro-Magnon 1. And then in 152,000 BC, the Luhari hybrids were crossed with the Urantia Urtite cloister humans, and upgrade 2 is done, and they created the Iluli Levi. Here we get the races of Levi and such. This is where we get the word Leviathan. Now, the Iluli Levi, Cro-Magnon 2, was the first one of the hybrids that was capable of natural procreation with a human, where it could actually conceive a child and bear a living child with a human. The others were still not genetically compatible to that degree, where fertilization would most often not occur, and if it did, it would be highly mutated and it would die. The child could not be born by them. This began the chaos, technically speaking, because if you now have a hybrid race, and if you get a hold of that hybrid race and you're fallen angelic, and you know that race can now naturally procreate, all you have to do is have your hybrid race rape humans, and you will create progressively more of your own in human form. And this is what began the craziness invasion. But the bioregenesis continued for the races. The Tothenki groups were still a part of this. They were still working with it. And the Tothenki groups are interesting because, remember how I said before, they were the Anu Seraphim, which means they were Anunnaki combined with certain of the fallen Seraphim, which were the Draconians or the Reptilians. So they could actually, by using their DNA, they could actually allow for both draconian races to incarnate into them and Anunnaki races. So it was a hybrid form that could be used to do bioregenesis for both fallen seraphim races like the draconians or reptilians and fallen Anu Elohim races like the Anunnaki. That was also part of the downfall because both of them could infiltrate that race, therefore. All right. So 152,000 BC we had Cro-Magnon II, the Eluli Levi races. From the Eluli Levi races, it went up from there. 151,000 BC, upgrade 3 was done. Eluli Levi became Eluli Judah. This is where we get the races that were transposed in our biblical text. They're not our tribes of Israel. These are the tribes of the Leviathan, and they were not part of those original biblical texts. The original 12-tribe human races were part of those original texts, and they transposed their race identity and their records into our books. Okay. 150,000 BC, there's a mess, but we had a glacial period after that one because the Jehovian Anunnaki attacked here and tried to take over, but they didn't win. But they crashed the firmaments, which are called hydrosuspension fields that controlled the planetary climate. We actually had planetary climate control at various periods where you could, kind of like your car or your house, you set it on climate control, you know, how much humidity you want, what temperature you want, you know, that kind of thing. You can do that with the crystal pylon temples of inner Earth, of the, you know, Eka line. They can modulate the frequencies here in a way that through our gates we can get climate control. And, well, when they're working properly. So in the Jehovian wipeout in 150,000 BC, we had a glacial period because a large part of our firmaments, or the hydrosuspension fields, collapsed. 148,000 BC, the next upgrade was done. The upgrade 4 created the Eluli Nephi races. And then there was a whole bunch of these guys, the Nephi races, that were infiltrated by Jehovian Anunnaki and created the what are called the Nephites. This is why certain teachings say, oh, you know, hail the return of the Nephites. They're supposed to be coming back in this time period. Not something to hail unless you're looking forward to becoming a Jehovian Anunnaki. And these large numbers of these have joined the Wesadek groups, you know, from this history forward. So the return of the Nephites has to do with the return of the Metatronic coding. Here we go again. Every stage of this hybridization program had its pros and its cons, meaning pros, that it was actually serving the purpose it was intended for the ones who stayed in the Emerald Covenant, the Thoth groups, then other ones that came in. One of the ones that came in later, I believe, in fact, in this period, I think, this is the first period they came in, I think, yeah, 148,000 BC, the being called Enoch, who had been an ascended master, and the good guy side had come in and incarnate specifically through the Jehovian Anunnaki fallen pattern to be able to try to bring them back up into bioregenesis. The Enoch crew got involved, and these were the Arcturian Jehovian Anunnaki races from the Arcturus system, from Orion and Arcturus, and they were different from the Pleiadian Nibiruan ones, and they tended to not like each other very much. They got involved with the Nephi level. They came into the experiment at the Nephi level. And so then you had two groups of Leviathan race, or, you know, Leviathan because they're all out of Levi, but usually we use Leviathan in terms of the Illuminati, what became the Illuminati. But there were two branches of these hybrid races that were created. One were the sons of Belial, and the others were the sons of Zadok. And these are... They were which were the reversals of. They were originally the sons of Lilib, the Lilibim, which were Thoth's crew, the ones that were on the good side. And this is where you get like the Lilith mythologies that come out of that, and the Zadokim or the Kodazim, and they actually reversed the letters once groups of them became, you know, fallen. They reversed them, so you had the Lilibim turned into the sons of Belial, and you had the Kodazim becoming the sons of Zadok. And these became prominent figures in the Atlantean period. I mean, at this point, we're still not into the height of Atlantean culture yet. These are Atlantean civilization really didn't come into being until, let's see, when was it? When the Atlantean root race was seeded. Atlantis was, the place was there, the cloister races were there, but it wasn't technically called Atlantis. That was a root race. It was a smaller race than the human cloister races that were coming in. It was a smaller branch of the human races. So, anyway, this is the step-by-step process that the Leviathan or the Illuminati races were created from. They were progressively crossed, and the idea was to get them up to strand 5, where they would take the reverse 11 DNA pattern and work strand 1 all the way up to strand 5 into non-reversal through the hybridization. At that point, they could pass through Stargate 5 into the Terran time field in density 2. You could get them out of here, and they could continue their evolution from there to get the next set of strands. But all along, every step of the way, there were raider races, fallen angelics, that came in and grabbed portions of them and hybridized with them and then used them as tools to create their little armies where they would go raid other villages. I mean, it's still, even in our recorded history, it's classic, the plundering of one group that conquers another. They come in, they rape the women, they, trash the society, they force their belief systems on them. Well, there are continually more children being born by the raping of angelic human females. They would very often come into a village, raid it, kill the males, and rape the females, and kidnap them, keep them until they found out whether they conceived or not. And if they conceived, they would, bear the children. There was a big hatred vibe that a lot of women carry from being a part of that time period where they hate children. And when they have their own children, they don't mean to hate children, but this emotional thing comes up where there's almost a desire to kill children because there was a violation that was done in that period, like in this pre-Atlantean period, where you were being forced to carry something that somebody else forced you to get pregnant with that was not going to have a human soul. It was going to have a fallen angelic soul. They would birth dark avatars in this way, and the women that were angelic humans that were forced into this type of breeding felt not only violated, but they knew they were contributing to the potential downfall of this planet. So there was a whole movement in the female consciousness that went into killing their offspring whenever they could, because they knew the souls coming into them were not human, and they were, of the other side. So this is some of the stuff we're still healing on a deep level. Women have a lot of that, and there's an anger that was in men. They felt very emasculated in the whole situation. They come in and be killed. They didn't want them for anything because they weren't gestation chambers like females were. So there's a lot of things we're still processing from this period. The Leviathan races, by the time we got up to, let me see, where, the last, number 5, the 5th upgrade. The 5th upgrade didn't come until 68,000 BC. That's because there was a whole lot of other crazy things, like from 148,000 BC to 75,000 BC. That's a long period of time. It was called the Anu occupation. Humans actually lived underground because the Pleiadian, Nibiru, and Anunnaki had got together and they'd come in and they'd taken over surface Earth. So they literally took over surface Earth and destroyed anything that wasn't of theirs, and were trying to either kill or kidnap and use human populations. So literally human civilization went underground. A lot of us will have cellular memory that's about that, where we'll actually remember times when we were so sensitive we could hear a footstep hundreds of feet up above us, because we lived underground. There are still many chambers that are left of the civilizations that were there, and there are other ones that were run by the negative ones as well, because there were periods when they went underground in relation to the dinoids, the dinosaur things. But anyway, because of the craziness that took place, that's a very long period of time. This is why the Anunnaki decided they owned the planet, because they come in and stole it, so they figured it's theirs. That's a typical, it's really the typical thing if you look at any of the politics that we're in the middle of right now. I mean, they're all fighting over stuff they stole from somebody else in the first place. It's like, anyway, when we get up to 68,000 BC, they finally did the last upgrade, and this was taking them from the Eluli Nephi up to the Anu Melchizedeks. This is where they were crossed with the 5th strand. They picked up the 5th angelic human DNA strand, the cloister strand of the Melchizedeks. And this is, out of these guys, they end up with the Templar Melchizedeks. And the Templar Melchizedek priesthood, which is the total opposition to the cloister. Once in a while, when they decide to enter the Emerald Covenant, they actually assist. But most of the history, the Templar Melchizedeks were the ones that were the front men and beings for were also in the phantom matrix. So you had a division between them. One was for the Wisadek bonding, the other Metatronic bonding, the other group of them was for the phantom bonding, but both of them were not anything to do with the Emerald Covenant. And right now, most of the Melchizedeks on the planet, the ones that woke up first, the ones that are going around and transmitting frequency to everybody and initiating them into the Melchizedek priesthood, most of them are Templars, which means most of them are Anunnaki. So, anyway, this was the progression, and I wanted the people who didn't hear this before to understand the progression of where these Leviathan Illuminati races that we talk about, where they came from. And it also answers the question of the Darwinian stuff. Where did the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon, where do they fit? Were these our human ancestors? No, they were not. They were the hybrid ancestors. The only connection to human they had was a little bit of human genetics that was put into their pattern to assist them to evolve to a higher level. They are not what we came out of at all. But there's been a whole movement since Atlantis. It was part of the Luciferian covenant, which was an agreement made by the fallen Anu Elohim races, the Anunnaki races, that they would progressively orchestrate something called transposition of race identity, where progressively, using radio body programming, using progressive genetic infiltration, they would transpose their race identity over the angelic human and the indigo race identity, and they would take over the planet. And taking over the planet meant bringing it into phantom and then into Wisadek matrix. So this has been a long, long process here. This will give you some idea of how much we've all invested in this drama. There's a lot of vested interest going on here. This is why they're not going to say, oh, they're busted, they're blowing the whistle on us, they're telling on us, we'll just go away. They're not going to do that. This is the ending point of this drama and the beginning of a new series of dramas. 3 new ones, in fact, 3 new paths of Genesis. Now, from Atlantis, I want to show you really quickly. We start with the fact that you have these races, one collective of hybrids that are being run by the Thoth collective that are Pleiadian Nibiruan, and another group that came from the Nephi level and up that were run by the Enoch group. Now, the Enoch group was representative of the Jehovian Anunnaki, the ones that consider themselves the pure strains, that they weren't mixed with the Seraphim. Then you had the Thoth ones that were the Anu Seraphim, the mixed ones. So you had 4 basic groups at this point. You had the Lilibim, which were the ones of Thoths that were still on the Christos evolutionary path, and then you had the ones that were made of reversing the DNA of those guys, and they were the sons of Belial. And you had on the Enoch side the Kodazim, which were the ones still in the Christos path, and then the Zadokim, the sons of Zadok, which were the ones who went into reversal. Now, they didn't go into reversal all at once. There were experiments being made by hijacking them at every stage of evolution, but it really came to a head where the formalization of the sons of Belial and the sons of Zadok came in the Atlantean period after 25,500 BC. It began with 22,326 BC when Thoth's group went defected from the Emerald Covenant, and Thoth made deals with the Anunnaki races from Alpha and Omega Centauri. This is what you get where you get the Alpha and Omega order Melchizedek races or Melchizedeks. For anybody that knows about the Melchizedek ordination systems, they say we are of the Alpha Omega order. You'll also find that in books like the Enoch books, of the Alpha and the Omega. When Thoth made deals with the Alpha Omega order Wisadek Anunnaki hybrids, this is when the fire sword initiations began, which means this is when he allowed his hybrids that he was put in charge of their evolution and getting them back into the Christos pattern. He allowed them, without asking them, he allowed them to begin receiving the frequencies transmissions of the flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael, that D13 reverse current that would begin the process of reversing their whole template. That began technically in 22,340 BC, right before the 326 BC, the 22,326 BC still activation cycle. That was the beginning of bringing fully into our race line the Metatronic distortion. But it's going to be more of a book that concentrates the history, where you see the whole history line. And when I talk about history, I'm really talking about the history from a very, very long time ago that moves up through the present, We've covered a lot of things for people who haven't been to workshops before. We have covered from the beginning times when life was seeded into this time matrix, not just on this planet, but into this 15-dimensional system, which began 950 billion years ago. That's a long time in Earth time calculation, and how that has led through a series of population of planetary systems, as we know them from Earth, what we would call planetary systems or star systems, and how that culminated in the seeding of Earth. Now, our history has been riddled with what we would consider to be war. There has been warring taking place in this time matrix for 250 billion years, which really isn't too bad if you look at the fact that from 950 billion years to 250 billion years, everybody got along well. So that was a pretty nice long stretch of peace. But it hasn't been peaceful here for a very long time. The people on Earth are in a very interesting place of consciousness, because when you come into Earth and you incarnate onto this planet, you're incarnating into, let's say, a little bubble. It's a quarantined reality field, and it's been quarantined for over 25,000 years. So people that are born on this planet come in with an innocence that is useful to some degree, but it is also an innocence that can be the downfall of this civilization. Because if a people don't know who they are and don't remember who they are, they don't remember where they came from or what larger drama their existence is a part of, it makes them very vulnerable for somebody to come in and fill in the blanks for them and tell them, oh, well, you're this, we created you, so now you follow us. In our recent history, say from Atlantis, 25,500 BC, up to the present, we have been like children on this planet. The races that were the guardians of this planet, that held huge history banks. I mean, this is when we were 12 feet tall and were breatharians. We didn't even need to eat because we had full control. This is what a human was. It was a being who had full control of its ability to manifest and demanifest. We did not need to eat foods. We did not need to, we had different organ systems in our bodies because of the advancement of our gene code. And we were innocent, but all-knowing. There is a place of being where you can be in innocence, but not unaware innocence. We were in aware innocence. Since 25,500 BC, and really it began before that, but the big axe fell during that period of time, and since then, we have been progressively becoming more lost within our hologram down here. We don't remember anymore that we're angels. We don't remember anymore that stargates even exist. Forget how to go through them. The fact that we don't have what we used to have is not an act of God. It's not an act of something that was supposed to be in the original divine blueprint for this planet or for this time matrix. But it was an act of, let's say, the interplay of stellar races that was allowed to occur, but only for a certain period of time. It was allowed to occur, and it's interesting. If we go through the history, we'll find, gosh, we've been victimized. That'll be one of the first things that pops out. How could God let anybody do this to us? This wasn't nice. This was like worse than not nice. This was awful. What has happened here has been awful in that context. But we, as humans, incarnating into this reality field, we chose this. We allowed this to take place for certain lessons that we wanted to learn. We were sent on, let's say, a kind of like cosmic doctor's mission. There were races that had fallen, races that were even more ancient than the human race. The human race was created as a doctor race, in a way, that we were going to come in and figure out how to fix it. The best way to find out is to find out what was really causing the problem. So we allowed ourselves to come into a situation where we would experience some of the same genetic mutations and loss of conscious awareness and twists of conscious awareness that those mutations created. So we allowed what has taken place. When we look back at the recent history has been one of the most brutal legs of development on Earth. But that's only in this seeding. There's been 3 seedings of human beings on this planet. Some of you know this that have been to other workshops. Some of you don't yet know this. But the first 2 seedings were literally wiped out. They were wiped out by the same forces that are back. They're here again, just like we are. Constantly, this place has been under siege because it is a significant location within what's called the Universal Templar System. The Templar system refers to the organic stargate system. A stargate system is also the ascension system, or the descension system, whichever way you're coming, down or up. All right. The Stargate system is the system of, you could call them portals, stargates. They're frequency modulation zones between the highest frequency spaces before matter has any density to come into the densification of the hologram that we experience as three-dimensional reality. So the Stargate system, every reality field has a Stargate system, be it in this time matrix or in this cosmic cluster or in others. The Universal Templar is a small part, and we'll learn this in the Dance for Love program, where you start to see how our huge Templar is very small compared to the larger Templar that it's a part of when we get into the God World Templars. But our 15-dimensional system has 12 primary stargates that control the matter systems. They go from pre-matter density at D12 all the way down to where we are here in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. And then there are higher systems of gates that have to do with the God worlds. But ever since the Lyran Elohim Wars of 250 billion years ago, there has been a problem in this time matrix. There have been created a system of stargates that didn't belong here in the first place. They were created because of an event that took place where a certain group of Elohai Elohim became convoluted in consciousness because they had inbred themselves to the point where they had genetic distortion and they were not genetically what they had once been. Because if you cross something with itself enough times, you begin to get errant deviations of the pattern that you didn't expect, and you never know what's going to come out. And that's what happened with some of these Elohim beings. Because of their mutation of consciousness, they decided that they wanted to be masters of this universe. They decided they didn't want it to be a free will universe. They decided that they had the right to do that. And if anybody wouldn't cooperate with them, well, they will just get rid of anybody who wouldn't cooperate with them. So they started warring in the Lyran system. They call it the Cradle of Lyra. That's where our stargates 12, 11, and 10 exist. They're the entry points into any of the lower density systems in this time matrix. When these wars occurred, the Elohai Elohim High Council, which were the ones in charge of Stargate 12, they were the High Council that was they were the closest ones to the Yanas, which are the Ascended Masters that are beyond being in the time matrix. They were commissioned as kind of the supervisory team to make sure everything went well in this particular time matrix, and they worked together with two other groups. You had the Elohai Elohim, the Seraphai Seraphim, and the Brahmarama races, and they had all agreed to something called the Emerald Covenant. The Emerald Covenant was a coevolution agreement that they would all agree to work a free will system here where we could explore the hologram and manifesting and creating in density. These were creator gods, parts of we were originally them. We got down here, but we were originally them. The Elohai Elohim, confronted with the problem of portions of their own race that had fallen to the point where they were beginning to war with the other races, they had also were watching this occur with the Seraphai Seraphim races. The Seraphai Seraphim races created avian life forms. They created reptilian and insectoid life forms. And some of theirs were also having the same problem, and they were fighting with the fallen Elohai Elohim. So there was a lot of conflict going on, and negotiations were tried to help these races re-evolve their genetic code so they could get their consciousness back so they could stop fighting with each other. But the Elohai Elohim decided to take they were called the Anu Elohim, that was one particular family of them, decided to take matters into their own hands. And if the Elohai High Council wasn't going to help them, then they would simply get rid of the Elohai High Council, and then they would go and get rid of the Draconian races that they didn't want here either, and they'd play Masters of the Universe, and this would be their time matrix. And they attempted and succeeded in destroying Stargate 12. Now, Stargate 12 is in a planet called, or a star from here, called Aramatena Lyra. When you look up in the Lyran system here, it's what they call the double-double in Lyra. So that's like, on the star charts, they would call that the double-double. That was the area of Stargate 12. It was in that planetary system. When Stargate 12 was destroyed, there was a big problem for this time matrix because the 12th dimensional frequencies hold what's called the divine blueprint. That's the full mathematical program for everything that's to be manifest in this system is held in scalar wave form within the 12th dimensional frequencies. When Stargate 12 was destroyed, it was fragmented. Those scalar wave forms were fragmented and ripped apart, and part of them went into what's called reversal, which means if you have, let's say, a mathematical program that runs number 1 through 20, take that and flip it around, and you have 20 running through 1. All right, it's a lot more complicated than that, but it's the same concept of a reversal. The mathematical program was running reverse on part of this system. This creates what's called a black hole. As far as science goes, in our contemporary times and sci-fi and that kind of stuff, they talk about black holes. Science here doesn't know a lot about black holes or what they do. But black hole systems are literally systems that, if you think of a pair of nylon stockings, and you know how they get a hole in them, and then it starts to get runners all over the place, and then the hole eats the rest of them, and then eventually so you throw them away. Well, you can't throw time matrices away. But black holes work like that, that once a hole is poked in the natural fabric of the scalar wave form, the energy that has gone into that fragmentation begins to reassemble itself in chaotic fragmented form. So let's say you had an alphabet of what we call fire letters or scalar wave forms that created a very beautiful ordered type of universe where things worked well. And you rip those apart and you get alphabet soup, and you throw half of the alphabet soup over this way and half over this way. The one that got thrown over this way became the black hole system, and it reordered itself on an unnatural mathematical program. That unnatural mathematical program did, however, allow for the system to continue, which means the life forms that got taken down into that particular matrix, and it was called the phantom matrix, they were able to, as consciousness, sustain and put themselves back together to a degree. And they formed creator gods in the phantom matrix. And those creator gods were the same ones who tried to blow up the stargates in the first place. They didn't get the whole time matrix, but they got part of it. And they created phantom matrix. And their main objective was to get the rest of the energy off of the main matrix, because they were not self-sustaining. When a black hole system is created, the only thing it can do to sustain itself is to draw energy from the matrix it fell from. If that door is closed in the matrix it fell from, it becomes a finite system that implodes in on itself. And when it implodes, we can never be away from God. But there's two ways to go home. One is fully aware and knowing it. The other is as space dust. You're still holy when you're space dust. You just don't remember it, and it doesn't have much meaning to you at the time. So the system called the phantom matrix, which is the beginning of the plight of war in this time matrix, is a system that is structured. They have matter like we do now, because since the Lyran Wars, since the black hole was created, they have progressively found ways to artificially order the energy that they could suck into their system. They have pulled planets into their system. They have pulled galaxies into their system from this time matrix. We're in the middle of a very long drama. We're in the middle of the end of a very long drama. Because for many, many billions of years, there's been a rescue mission going on here, trying to get races to evolve back out of the phantom matrix, back out of the black hole system, so they can get their Christic imprint back. The Christic imprint belongs to everybody, not just Christians. In fact, the people that call themselves Christians in this day and age that are more interested in telling you that you have to listen to the Bible the way it's written by the Council of Nicaea more than they're interested in finding out what Christianity is really about. The Christic imprint is your divine blueprint scalar wave pattern. We all come in with one, at least we originally did. Now that's just the people in the black hole system, the races that have evolved from there. They no longer have that. They have created races upon races from their system that were born without what's called a Christic spark. That means they don't have the original ordered mathematics as the basis for their template. So they've created many, many distorted forms, many, let's say, mutated children. The children of the phantom matrix became very much intertwined with the children of our matrix. And Earth became one of the main places where that took place. The intertwining of races and the natural angelic races on this side of the barrier, let's say, began way before we came to Earth. It began in the Gaian system. Now, when I talk about Gaia, I'm talking about density 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. It's an etheric matter density level, where we have physical matter here. Then density 2 is a stage between this level of physicality and etheric, where if you imagine what you think a ghost might look like, that kind of, you can poke your finger through it kind of matter, but it's still there, except it doesn't look that way when you're there. It looks just as physical when you're there. It just looks etheric from here. Right. Anyway, it began with Gaia. And it's funny because if you look at the Greek mythologies, Lady Gaia was a goddess that was a goddess of the earth and things. Yeah, definitely true. Yeah. They didn't tell you about density levels, and they took all the science away from it. But they personified Gaia and the names of a lot of things into the Greek mythologies and the Roman mythologies. But the problems began, that are affecting Earth, began in the Gaian system. And that began about 570 million years ago, where there was a whole bunch of wars. And it was always, you had the angelic races that were trying to assist the fallen races to get out of the black hole system before the black hole system was closed permanently. Because once it was closed, you couldn't get them back out again. So it was an act of love to keep the system open, to allow it to have enough energy by taking energy from the system so it could sustain long enough to try to evolve these people back into their... But the warring it got progressively more intense from the time of 570 million years ago, because this is when the original guardian races that were here were called the Azarites. They were a collective race that was created by putting the genetic templates of the Elohai Elohim, the Seraphai Seraphim, and the Brahmarama races all together into one to create a race that was appointed as the guardians of the Templar of this time matrix. They were the original angelic race that was supposed to go in here and help the others evolve back out and make sure they didn't destroy a whole bunch of things in the process. Well, the Azarites became entangled in one of the major wars in the Gaian system. They were called the Gaian-Orion Wars, and it had to do with some of the draconian races in the fallen matrix that are associated with the Orion system, and it had to do with a number of other races. We'll get into more of that history when we talk about the Metatronic thing, because this is when Metatron became a problem for our time matrix. But in the meantime, this period, 570 million years ago, was a turning point in this time matrix. The Azarites encountered some problems where large numbers of them ended up in the Phantom Matrix trying to get the others out. So a new race had to be created to serve as the guardian race on this side, and that's where humans were created. We were originally called the Oraphim angelic human, and from the Oraphim came another type of human. It was a step down in the gene code. The Oraphim had anywhere from 24 to 48 DNA strand templates. When you step them down, they're called the Indigo Children this time around, for anyone who hasn't followed the work. Step down from there was the Turanicium II human, angelic human, and they were seated on Tara, where the Orphim were seated on Gaia and in the Sirius star system and in the Lyran star system. And then the Turanicium II were seated in the Taran time system. Tara is the density 2 counterpart of Earth. That's dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And they're also time frames. Now they're simultaneous time frames. So you have these races and these parts of our races that exist right now in their space-time coordinates. They're still there just like we are here at this time. From the Turanicium 1s came the Turanicium 2s. The Turanicium 1 is the Taran Turanicium angelic human. The Turanicium 1 are the ones that came from there. Now the Turanicium 1s on Tara had 24 strand DNA templates. They went from 24 to 12, and then the Turanicium 1s had, I keep getting 1s and 2s. 1s were first, 1s were on Tara. They had 24 strand DNA, 24 to 12. And then out of them came the Turanicium 2s, the second experiment. And that was the Earth humans, the angelic humans of Earth. But they were also put here with Oriphims. The Oraphim were the indigo children who were called the Magi. They were the Magi Grail line that were put on the planet to protect the angelic human races, the Turanicium races, so together we could all heal the Templar here and finish the mission. The mission has been here for a long, long time, and the mission was, when it was originally agreed by the high councils of the Christos founders races, there's a decision to be made 250 billion years ago. Do we close the Phantom Matrix now and stop it from getting any worse? Or do we keep it open to try to help these races evolve back out? Because if we close it, they're gone, and their evolution will lead them into space dust, which is okay. I mean, they're still a part of God. But when you go back as space dust, you don't go back and go back up. You are still within the hologram. You become part of the substance of the dimensional field within the time matrix that you got stuck in. So if your template gets fragmented, you end up as little tiny pieces of scalar waveforms with your consciousness not being able to talk to itself anymore. And you go back to dust, as they say, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You go back to consciousness dust, and you don't go fully back out of the matrix. You'll be the substance that something else comes into the matrix, evolves through. You will evolve back through another form, but you won't recognize yourself as what you originally came in with. So it was a big decision. Do we make sure they can't cause any harm? Because like to blow up Stargate 12 in the Divine Blueprint in the Time Matrix is not a small thing. That was the point of original sin, and it was created by the Anu Elohim races. And that's why it even ended up in our Bible way down here, this long. You know, since that time, it's even come all the way through history to this point. The decision was made to keep the time matrix open, the phantom matrix open, to see how many of them we could evolve back out. Because there were several races that weren't intended to go. One of the races that wasn't intended to go are called the Odedicron reptilians. They were out of the Seraphim family. They weren't the Draconians. Now, Draconians are called Omicron Draconians. They are different than reptilians. They have partial reptilian gene code at this point, but they started out as dragon moths. So they're like a reptile moth type being, and they evolved a lot of things out of there. They were the original fallen Seraphi race. But in the mess that was taking place in Lyra 250 billion years ago, when these wars were happening, the Odedicron reptilian races lived on the same planetary system in Vega Lyra, that the fallen Draconian ones lived on. And when the Draconians tried to fight back against the Anu Elohim from Stargate 11, which was in a planet called Avion in Lyra, they ended up getting sucked into the black hole with the Omicron and with the Anu Elohim. So it was primarily because of the Odedicron races that had not wanted, they were still Emerald Covenant. They hadn't done that on purpose. They just got stuck between a rock and a hard place and ended up in a black hole. A lot of it was, when you size it up, it was basically, that's what happened to them. And there was great love from the founders' races for all of them, even the ones of their own who had tried to destroy them. I mean, it's like having a child that goes crazy. You still love the child, but you have to do something, or it's going to blow up the house and assassinate the neighbors and that kind of thing. And you may love it, but at some point you've got to restrain it or something before it, because it's not helping itself by doing those things either. So there was a lot of love. The decision to keep the matrix open was a decision of love, and it wasn't a decision that had to be made. There was absolute justification at that time to close the matrix, to say, you guys made a choice. You were warned about what that choice would do. Now you've harmed yourselves in a big way. Who are you going to blame? Now, they blamed High Council. Well, if you had destroyed the Draconians like we asked you to, we wouldn't have had to blow up your Stargate, right? This is the mentality. What's scary is, you ever listen to, lately, the conflict in the Middle East? Do you ever hear these people debate each other on TV when they have the representatives of the Palestinian side and the representatives of the Israeli side? Some of them carry that attitude, it's like, well, you made me do it. I have to go keep blowing people up because you make me do it. It's like, wait a minute, who's going to take some accountability for your own actions here? The whole argument goes way, way back. There are races all over this 15-dimensional matrix and phantom matrix that have these attitude problems where they don't want any responsibility for their choices. So they blame, and if you can blame somebody, then you've made a target for yourself. So you don't have to grow. You have to go and pick on them and try to suck their energy and mess them up, and then you feel vindicated. This is what has created the whole situation of perpetual warring. But anyway, we have a problem still with Phantom Matrix. It was left open because of love, and because there's always, and it's still an attitude that's very much held by Christos races, where there's life, there's hope. If it fell, it can rise again. Theoretically, anyway. And it was a big theory, because Council had never, Council was a council of creator God beings that used to be ascended master beings that weren't in matter, that, had decided that they would follow this imprint that Source created, that you could create matter systems, and, this could be neat. This was new to them, too. What do you do when that happens? Help. Who do you talk to? You call up to the Janus Ascended Master groups. I think we have problems down here. Did you ever hear of this one before? Is there any other matrix that this happened to? And there had been. Not too often, but there were a few other time matrix systems that had that, and some of them completely and totally imploded, which creates a major problem of restructuring. Because if you put enough holes in something, eventually the air or the life force energy goes out and the whole pattern falls to chaos. Source can't allow that to happen, or the whole arena of the hologram would fall apart. So whenever it gets to the point where there's a black hole that's trying to eat everything around it, there has to be a point where Source itself will intervene and say, okay, the balances are going to be reset. At that point, that could have happened in this time matrix 25 billion years ago. And there's still a lot of debate in Council as to See, there's one group that said, we told you so. We told you, just do it now. Right? But there's the other group. There's the other group of bleeding hearts. Oh, but where there's life, there's hope. Yeah, I guess he was on that team. It's really funny. The reason I use the word light, love, and clueless a lot is because I spend a lot of my existence in the last 500 billion years in the light, love, and clueless space, which means, oh, if there's light, there's hope. Love it. Love it enough and it'll come back. Love it enough and it won't destroy you. Love it enough and it'll become good, even if it doesn't want to be. No, it won't. So there's a whole group of counsel right now that kind of sits there and goes, well, understand the love that you guys were coming from. And because it's a free will system, we honored your wishes. Happy now? Can we finish it now? The finishing has to do with simply resetting the divine blueprint completely. And that means opening the God world gates and allowing the frequency to come through that will put the regular mathematics back here that originally came here. But at this point, I mean, we should have done it before. When I look back and say, I was on that couch last year, I really should have gone the other way. But it seemed so heartless. It seemed like, well, you have this handful of fallen angelic races that used to be our brothers and sisters. We love them. We don't want to abandon them. Might have been put them out of their misery and us too. Because right now, you not only have the original groups, you have billions of races that they've created. You have billions of hybrid races that they've created by coming through to this side and finding out ways to use artificial genetic engineering to combine the life forms from here with the life forms from there. We have allowed a mess to occur. And we had the greatest intentions in doing so. It was the intentions of love, and yes, you can heal it. We didn't know any better. You have to think, theoretically, that whatever it is, if God made it, and God let it get broke, then God could fix it. Well, some things, because of the order of the way the universe works, just the mathematics, the physics that are needed to create the hologram, some things are more easy to accomplish than others. Now, you can, if we did not have a free will time matrix here, if we wouldn't have been nullifying our own point by saying, okay, we're going to make them get better. Right? We're going to go in there, wipe their memory clean, put them back together, and then drag them out by the bootstraps. Now, that's more like the things they like to do, those kind of things. That would have been a violation of the free will of those who chose to take that path. So we had to find ways of re-education and of assisting them with what's called bioregenesis, DNA template regenesis. Because if you have your DNA template shattered and you don't have a D12 imprint anymore, the concept of Christ consciousness means nothing to you. It's like a language you've never heard before. You can't feel the unity vibration that comes from the D12 pattern. You can go and kill something and say, oh, that's neat. Wow, look at that when it dies. Wow, look at that. So that's what happens, and feel nothing. The beings in the phantom matrix don't feel in the same way that beings on this side do. The ones who have crossed between the hybrid people have a little bit of each, which is even harder, because it's like having a demon that lives inside of you, an angel and a demon at the same time, where the angel feels, but it doesn't quite understand what it's doing, and the demon comes through and says, oh, I want to do that, whack. And it goes smacking things and, hurting things, and the other part says, oh, should I maybe feel bad there? So we're in the middle of the end of a drama that has a huge history attached. The history in terms of our planet itself is long and exhausting enough. We've brought a lot of that through, and a lot of that's going to go in the Forbidden Testaments, the Revelation. Because when you see the history, you kind of go, oh my God. Oh, that's what they didn't tell us in history class in school. It gives you a whole different perspective on what's taking place. Right now we can watch the TV and look at the Palestinian-Israeli drama. We can look at the dramas that are happening in Africa or happening in Argentina. And people all over the place have always been fighting on this planet. This is not natural. This is not normal. But it's become how things usually go in this time matrix. What we have no memory about anymore is realizing, oh, when you watch the situation on TV, oh yeah, they're the ones that they're working the Drac agenda, and okay, these guys are working the Anunnaki agenda. They always hated each other. Of course they're fighting. We look at people, and we call them humans, and we say they're fighting because they can't figure out how to like each other. And of course, where there's life, there's hope. Somewhere there must be a way to get them to like each other. Maybe build a wall between them for a while, and eventually they can learn to not hate each other's guts. Yeah, they're going to try that probably in the Middle East. Bless them. They'll have holes in the wall after a while, just like we had holes in the wall we put between here and the Phantom Matrix. We're on a planet that has, it's like, anybody ever see Star Wars and the Star Wars bar scene? Where they had things of all sorts hanging out at the bar, right? It was classic. Because there's a point in time when you start to get your eyesight back, your inner, your ancient eyes start to really open, where you walk into a room and you realize we're walking on, this is like the Star Wars bar planet. Things wear human masks here. And what's scary is, a lot of us wouldn't know. I'm like, gee, am I human? Now that I think about it, I never asked myself that question. Right? If I took off my human mask, would I be an Orifeme, which is what an Orifeme or a Trinicium? Would I be a human, or am I something else? We're taught here to amalgamate the concept of humanity as one race that's bipedal and it kind of looks like this, and it's all one thing and always was. That isn't the way it is here. We all have, we may be of different races, that's fine. There's a lot of Lyran Syrians running around right now. If Orifeme put on their full clothing, they'd be 12 feet tall and look very, very different, and they'd be considered pretty strange compared to most people. We look pretty weird. So would most of you. I can see it if they remove the stuff in the grids that are keeping the gene code here, and everybody within a week morphed back into their original self. You wouldn't have enough psychiatric wards, because you'd walk into the bathroom in the morning to wash your face and go, ah! And everybody would be doing that everywhere with each other on themselves. But the truth is, right now, we're wearing a mask of humanity. All of us are. And on the surface, you can't tell who's from where or what their agenda is. But in truth, all of the agendas that we're seeing running, all of the things that are happening in our daily lives now that are going to become more and more in our faces as we go through the next 10-year period, these are all about politics that have to do with three primary groups. One are the Amafrandriconians, another are the Anunnaki or Anu Elohim races, and the third one, and they're pretty much the ones that are most overlooked, are the Guardian races. They figured they had us neutralized a long time ago, so there's not enough of us on the planet to cause a problem. So the fight that's happening right now, that we're watching evolve right now, has to do with a very ancient battle, a battle that was scripted in Atlantis to take place, but it was put on hold because of a stalemate with the stellar activation cycle there. It's a battle of dominion between the Anu Elohim forces and who are working those agendas, and the ones who are working the Draconian agendas. There's a third player in this, but they've always kind of been a part of it, and we'll talk about them when we get into the Metatronic thing. They're called the Wisadek races. They were from a different black hole system, and they joined forces with the ones from Phantom. So we'll talk about them more. What I want to, in the Metatron workshop, but tonight what I want to do is just touch a bit on, since we're in the places of, where the Minoan, remnants of their places are and those kind of things. It would be nice to find out, where do these fit in our history? I was kind of glad that I didn't have to get into this when we had our guides with us before, especially the First Lady. I figured she would probably push me over a cliff by the time I was done, bless her. Because she's really into the mythological god things, and that's fine. And it's very romantic, the mythologies involved with the gods. We have Zeus and Apollo and all these wild love affairs, and they did some really wacky things. If you read the mythologies, they were marrying each other's brothers and sisters. Some were having babies with their own fathers and even mothers. It was like anything was fair game with these guys. And it was okay because the gods did it. So there was a period of fun, you might say, in the psychosis of human evolution. But these guys came from somewhere. These mythologies came from someplace, just as did the Christian mythologies and the Hebrew mythologies, the things that we base so much of our lives on, cultures on right now. Very rarely are we taught to think, first of all. We're taught to absorb information as it's presented to you and follow it, period. And as long as you behave, you'll be socially acceptable, you might be able to have a job, and at least if you're in a more developed country, you'll be able to eat, have a home, and have a functional little, probably meaningless, but at least you'll be able to occupy yourself life. This is what we're taught.
We are not taught to sit in history class and they say, yes, the pyramids were built by many people dragging very large rocks up ramps. You're not taught to think, wait a minute, how many people does it take to do that? And you're definitely not taught to think, well, gee, are you sure they did it that way? Maybe they levitated them. You're not allowed to think. You're not taught to think here. We're taught to regurgitate history and basic things that make us functional, like math and science, and things that we can be put to work as good little soldiers. And we're happy because we think we're free, or, well, at least in America and in the free countries, we have that, and even the other countries don't even have that. But we're not taught to look deeper into what's happened here. If we look at our history and what we're told is the way history has unfolded, you would not believe the holes in these stories. And if you look at the line of history, oh yeah, these guys came from here, we think they came from over there, and then they raided these guys, and they became these guys. It's like, oh really? Where'd they come from? I don't know. We think they came from over there. Well, it might have been over here. Who knows? Right? And then, of course, you go back to Darwin, and it's like, where'd we come from? I don't know. First we thought they might have been apes. Now we think we might have come from fish. I don't know. We're not really sure either. But it's this way. They don't have the answers. They have guesswork. They have pieces of things they found in the past that they try to put together and make a puzzle out of to tell us what our life is about, where we came from. And we are told to simply accept that this guesswork are the facts that you're going to build your life on. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. The history here is much longer and much more intense than anything we have encountered. When they've been giving us progressively the history over the last 3 years, I've hit points of overwhelm where it is that I don't want to know anymore. Enough. You know, the stuff in Lyra, that was enough. You know, at least that's a long time ago and far, far away. But when you start to bring it into Atlantis, this is where it got really touchy for me, because there's a lot of pain still wrapped around it. There's a lot of us here. If we're here now, it's because we were here during the Atlantean period. There's nothing new on this planet. It's all been recycling because it couldn't get out of here because of what happened in Atlantis. So there's a history that took place primarily from 25,500 BC forward. That's what's directly affecting us now. There were other things that affected us before that. There were 2 extinctions of the human races on Earth because of war with the Anunnaki races primarily. And it's really funny. If you look at the New Age movement, one of the things that you'll find is any of them that acknowledge that there's other races, they acknowledge there's Anunnaki, and they acknowledge that there's draconian-type races. The Anunnaki always make the Dracs out to be the bad guys. And they're the good little saviors that'll come in. They're the ascended masters that'll come in and help you. Just give your power here. They're the ones that have learned the art of seduction. They've learned that you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So they give you whatever it is you might want. And they do it in a loving, soft, melodic voice. And usually with very pretty faces. And they'll heal your little thingy that might be wrong. And they'll help. They'll even promise you lottery tickets, but very, very rarely will they deliver on those. These guys are the ones coming from the Anu Elohim, or the ones coming from the races that interbred with the other races, from the fallen matrix, the other fallen time matrix, the Wesadek matrix. We're in the middle of a con job that's unbelievable. If we get to a point where we think, oh my God, there actually might be these other factions of life forms out there. You have the people of the ET movement, where they know things are flying around the skies. I mean, there's enough stuff on video at this point. Like, we're all making it up? I don't think so. But they're the ones that, like, they say, oh, what is this? They watch the New Age guys, who are often like white robes dancing around in circles, which they do have a reason for dancing around in circles. At least we know that. But there's this whole division happening between these people. Each side thinks the other's totally wacky. That neutralizes both sides, and meanwhile you have mainstream people walking around in a total daze, where none of it's real. We know that. I mean, didn't you read Darwin's book? You know, didn't you read this? Didn't you read that? Yeah, we read it, and we don't like it. You know? The history is coming toward us whether we want it or not. The past is coming back. Atlantis is rising, and we're walking around in the middle of it. There was a whole series of events that took place between 25,500 BC and, let's say, 100 years ago. There was a script that was step-by-step enacted. It was a script that came out of an agreement called the Luciferian Covenant. The Luciferian Covenant was an agreement that involved some of the hybrid races. I won't go into the story of the Leviathan races right now. I've covered that in other workshop material. But it was a hybrid experiment that was to help the fallen races. They got in here through hybridization because we let them, because where there's life, there's hope. That's one of those shoot the horses, don't they? Yes, that was a dumb thing to do. But they're allowed in, and there's lots of them running around the planet right now, and most of them don't know that they're that, so they're just as innocent and clueless as the rest of us, right? So you can't blame them for it. But anyway, we're in a situation of history that has evolved through some significant periods. If we go to the history of this area has been like a combat zone for ages and ages, because there's a lot of connections here to Stargate 5, which is a gate connection directly to Tara. It is coming toward us whether we want it or not. The past is coming back. Atlantis is rising, and we're walking around in the middle of it. There was a whole series of events that took place between 25,500 BC and, let's say, 100 years ago. There was a script that was step-by-step enacted. It was a script that came out of an agreement called the Luciferian Covenant. The Luciferian Covenant was an agreement that involved some of the hybrid races. I won't go into the story of the Leviathan races right now. I've covered that in other workshop material. But it was a hybrid experiment that was to help the fallen races. They got in here through hybridization because we let them, because where there's life, there's hope. That's one of those shoot the horses, don't they? Yes, that was a dumb thing to do. But they're allowed in, and there's lots of them running around the planet right now, and most of them don't know that they're that, so they're just as innocent and clueless as the rest of us, right? So you can't blame them for it. But anyway, we're in a situation of history that has evolved through some significant periods. If we go to the history of this area has been like a combat zone for ages and ages, because there's a lot of connections here to Stargate 5, which is a gate connection directly to Tara in density 2. And there's also other things here. There's control grids that have been put in here, particularly in 22,326 BC. The turnstiles have been concentrated in these areas of what used to be Ionia. There's also a bunch of them up in England, which used to be Lohas Atlantis. They're positioned all over the planet. But this place, like many others where, that were related to gate areas, has been a place of constant, one group gets in, another takes it over. One other group gets in, another takes it over. The influence that's been here primarily, no matter how hard the Anunnaki races tried, the Dracs still held this one. This was one of theirs that they weren't going to let go. When I say the Dracs, the people that have been used, the people who have been used, the Leviathan races, we call them the Illuminati races, that these are races that are born. They're in human form like everybody else, but they're not born with a Christos spark, because they were conceived out of a generation of Leviathan races that didn't have the Christos spark. What inhabits those beings are souls from the fallen matrix, from the phantom matrix. Now, they don't know that when they get here. The phantom matrix uses their people as expendable bodies to get their presence on planet, and they don't care much for their own races. So they don't take care of them. That's why there's a lot of Illuminati people here. The people they beat up on most of are usually themselves. They don't take very good care of their own peoples. Now, we've all evolved to a point where people are trying to take care of each other, whoever you're from, down here, which is the saving grace element, where you're almost tempted to say, where there's life, there's hope. You can help them all. That one again. I know a lot of people that are Illuminati, that were born in the Illuminati pattern, and they didn't, on a conscious level, choose to do this. They just found themselves created and in bodies, and they grew up, and they have a childhood that they remember, and they don't remember anything else before that, and that kind of thing. But these races have been used like puppets by the fallen angelics who created them. And because of their human imprint, even if it's very small, they don't have a full Christic imprint yet. They don't have 12 strands. But the Leviathan races received 5 strands. They received 5 strands of the human angelic, one at a time. This is where we got our going from Neanderthal man up to like Cro-Magnon and eventually into what we call the Homo sapien. That wasn't our evolution. That was their evolution, because they had a basic ape-hominid form that was created by using certain elements of, I think, monkeys from here and some of their own race strains. And we took that form, when they entered the Emerald Covenant, that form was used to begin splicing in, little bit at a time, the strand templates from the angelic human race to give them the ability to evolve into a form they'd never had before, but a form that would allow them to eventually, if they could regenerate 5 strands over many generations, they could then leave here. This 5th strand activation would allow them to go through the stargates here to get to density 2. You could get them off Earth, get them out of here already, because they had been causing problems here. It was because of those races that the human race fell twice here and was destroyed and had to be reseeded. So it was like, fine, get them evolved, get them out of here, get them up to Terra where we can handle them better and help them on their next stage. They were on a program of evolving to 12-strand evolution so they could get their 12 strands back. But they got hijacked in the middle of it. The races that they had originally incarnated out of, it was like there was a rebellion in Phantom Matrix. A whole bunch of races, fallen races, decided they didn't want to be fallen anymore. They decided they wanted to work their way back and not play, the fallen angelic game anymore. Forget Masters of the Universe. This isn't fun anymore. Basically we don't like it here. And they entered, once they were in incarnation, they had the ability to make a choice to join the Emerald Covenant. They could make a choice that if they were in a form, any form at all, even an animal form here, they could transfer their soul out of the animal form here and into one of these hybrid races that would give them an evolutionary path. It wasn't going to be, you're going to get there tomorrow. It was going to be, you're going to work your way back out. That's the only way you can do it, is to rebuild the template. So they agreed to come in. They're not born with a Christos spark, but they're born with the potential to regenerate it. It makes them, the Illuminati races, even like in the past and now, have a weakness genetically. It's a weakness that allows them more vulnerability. They can be messed with easier. They're like little puppets because of their gene codes. It's like having little black holes in the DNA template. They can literally, if there's a consciousness from the fallen matrix that wants to mess with them, they can move right into their bioenergy